session interactive, and you can gain most out of it. Pooja, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sumit, for an introduction and giving me this opportunity to conduct a basic squint examination class. So, like he said, it can seem to be very difficult, but what we can understand or remember of squint is it is very much like maths or very logical. And it's one of the things if you kind of remember understand right now, you may not have to memorize it later, and it's going to keep coming to you as and when you all see patients. And even the exam should be very simple after that. I'm going to try my best to make it extremely simple and to just give you all the fundamental understanding of the same. Okay, so we'll begin with what is a squint. So essentially, squint. So what a common or a layman often says when they'll come to OPD is that my child has been squinting eyes when watching TV. Okay. And what they mean by that squint is that they squeeze their eyes to kind of overcome some kind of a refractive error. What medically squint implies or strabismus actually implies is a misalignment of the visual axis. So where we say that the two eyes are visually aligned properly, it means that the eyes are in orthotropic position. Okay, that means the two eyes are aligned with the visual axis in one direction. However, if one of the eyes is deviated to either the nasal side, temporal side, upwards, downwards, etc., it is called a squint. So now the visual axis is basically formed by what? By us looking at an object, and when that line which is falling from the object onto our fovea forms a visual axis. So there are some terminologies that I would like to take you through, which is duction, version, vergence, intermittent, constant, and alternating. Why we will do this is because often we start getting confused between just basic terminologies. So duction is basically movement of one eye. Monocular eye movements are ductions. Version, SION, is binocular movements which are conjugate. Conjugate meaning that they move together. Vergence, gens meaning GENCE, which is again a binocular phenomena. However, this is disconjugate. Disconjugate meaning both the eyes do not follow the Hering's law. Now comes the important part. One is intermittent, one is constant, and one is alternating. So intermittent implies that it is there sometimes and it is not there sometimes. Constant means it is there all the time. Alternating means sometimes it is right, sometimes it is left. That is alternate. Instead of uniocular will be or unilateral will be only right or only left. So alternating is actually the opposite of unilateral. One eye versus both eyes. Intermittent and constant is different. That means it is there sometimes, it is not there sometimes, or it is there all the time. Okay. And we'll go to the basic types of our squints. That means we are looking at esotropia. SO is esotropia. That means one eye is fixing, the left eye here is fixing straight, and the right eye is deviated nasally, is esotropia. Exotropia, XO, is one, the left eye looking straight and the right eye is deviated temporally. Now, this is hypertropia, meaning that your left eye is looking straight, but the right eye is hyper. Hyper meaning up, and tropia meaning it is deviated in that direction. Now we have hypotropia. That means your left eye is straight and your right eye is deviated downwards. Downwards is hypo. So hyper is up, hypo is down, ESO is in, and EXO is out. So what is going to be the goal of having any squint examination that we do? We want to firstly establish whether there is a squint or there is no squint. Often you may feel that a child has squint or an adult has squint, but they may not have squint. Or you will have a parent that brings a child to you saying that I feel that my child's eye is deviated inwards. And this is whether it is a true squint or a pseudo squint, is what we first need to distinguish. If there is a squint, you want to know what type of a squint. So in the types we discussed was based on the direction, you can have esotropia, exotropia, hypertropia, or hypertropia, or you can have based on the frequency, that it is there all the time. That means, is it a constant squint or is it an intermittent squint? That is the second type. The third thing that you want to know in the type is whether it is there all the time, whether it is a uniocular squint, that is only one eye is squinting, or alternating squint, that means both eyes are squinting. So there are three things that we're going to determine at the end of knowing that there is a squint. Which eye, all the time or not all the time, and which direction. Okay. Once we go through that, we've established that there is a squint, we've established the direction of the eyeball and how it is manifesting. Then we go to measuring the amount of the squint. So we measure whether it is a small squint, large squint, and we give it an absolute value using prisms, which is going to be your amount of squint. Then you look at the sensory status. What does sensory status mean? Normally we have two eyes viewing together, which means we have a binocular single vision. That is what we normally have. Now, when there is a squint, you can have a disruption in this binocular vision because one eye is looking straight and another eye is not looking straight. So this sensory status can be of different types, which we will discuss later. And that is what we want to establish. And that's what's going to give us the final treatment plan. Also, amblyopia we want to establish, because what is amblyopia? Firstly, amblyopia is basically a lazy eye. That means the vision in one eye is lagging behind. Okay. And this can happen because one eye is not viewing because it is deviated away from the normal visual axis, and hence it is inhibited or suppressed. So we need to treat the amblyopia. So we begin any squint examination, obviously, first by beginning the visual acuity. So we are all very familiar with assessing vision for adults, in which we use the basic Snellen's or ETDRS charts to assess the visual acuity. However, we need to look for age-appropriate visual acuity, especially to pick up amblyopia or lazy eyes, which is treatable in the younger years, that is in children less than 6 to 7 years of age. So these are the different types of visual acuity charts that we are showing you. I'm going to tell you this is called a Lia symbol chart for a child who can understand what shapes are, and they can use matching to match that, oh, I'm showing them a circle or if I show them an apple and the child is going to match an apple. This is for younger children than that, where they cannot tell us what the shape is or cannot match the shape, but they're interested in looking towards a specific print. This is called the Cardiff Visual Acuity Chart. This is something called the Teller's Acuity cards or the TAC cards, where the child prefers to look at a side which has this kind of a grating pattern and not look in the direction which doesn't have a pattern. This is something which is extremely basic, which you may not find in all OPDs. This is called an optokinetic nystagmus drum, which elicits vision in a very, very small child. After we assess the visual acuity, we will know whether any eye is lagging behind in vision, and then you may start patching or amblyopia therapy of this kind, where you occlude one eye. So you want to assess the visual acuity. You want to look at retinoscopy or refraction of the patient after that, because we do not want to assess squint in a patient that is not refracted at all. First, we want to use either atropine. If it's a very young child, less than 1 year, 100% you're going to use an ointment, atropine 1% to dilate or cycloplegic the eyes. or you use HOMIDE in older children to cycloplegic the eyes and establish the retinoscopy. You all have already undergone a refraction class, so you all are aware about retinoscopy and how you can refract a child of an age that cannot help us with a refraction on post-mydriatic testing. After we have assessed the refraction, we want to look at sensory assessment. So sensory assessment, like I told you, is whether the patient has a binocular single vision or not. So if you do not have a single vision with two eyes, what are the other options? Okay. So if fusion is your center with your two eyes working together, say if you have one eye looking straight and the other eye which is deviated, when you were very young, when that child is young, what the brain starts doing is it starts suppressing the eye which is not seeing the clear object which is falling on the fovea. So which is called suppression or inhibition. Okay. So this is one aspect of your sensory status. What is the opposite of that? Can be diplopia. Diplopia meaning though your eyes are looking at two different things, the brain is not able to suppress. So the brain starts seeing one object with the right eye and sees the same object at another point in the other eye, which results in diplopia or double vision. Now, this sensory assessment can be done by different methods. So we first begin with stereopsis. Okay, stereopsis meaning 3D vision testing or the depth perception testing. Now, this depth perception or 3D vision is something which you all know happens when you go for a 3D movie. You all are given these glasses which dissociate the images between the two eyes, which allows you to see something which is coming closer towards you, which is the highest level of function which humans are given and which is what we want to achieve. So stereopsis tests can be of these different types. We have names like Titmus fly test, TNO random dot test, or Lang's test. Now these tests have different methods by which they work. Some require spectacles to view 3D objects. Some do not require spectacles and hence can be used for younger children as well. And they have their own advantages and disadvantages. So even for us, if we are using a microscope to operate our cataract surgeries, our depth perception is very important because we are working in a very, very small segment of the eye and we are trying to do very microscopic movements, and it helps us to know whether we are going to puncture the posterior capsule or not. And this is your stereopsis, where two eyes look in the same direction and have aligned vision. So this is the greatest type of vision you can have. If you have a squint, stereopsis tends to drop. Now, normal stereopsis is basically up to 40 seconds of arc. The smaller the number, the better the stereopsis. So if you have 480 seconds of arc, it is a lower stereopsis or lower depth perception. But if you have 40, it is the best. Now you have something which is simple, which is called diplopia charting. In diplopia charting, we use a red filter over one eye and a green filter over another eye, and we show a single light, a single yellow light. Now, since one eye is looking through a red filter, that same yellow light appears red, and one eye is looking through a green filter, the yellow light appears green. So imagine that the right eye is viewing a red line and the left eye is viewing a green line. If these two align, if the two eyes are seeing one image, you're going to see only one line. However, if the eyes are not aligned and the patient has a double vision, you're going to have manifestations like this, where the patient will say, I am seeing two lines, maybe not on the right side, but when I look more to the left. And this is how you document on diplopia charting. This would be a sixth nerve palsy in the left eye. Hence, on the left side, there is more doubling of the vision. So the distance between the two images is very far. However, when the patient looks on the right side, there is a single image that is formed. The next test for this sensory examination is your Wirtz 4-dot test. It is an extremely important test. It is there on our basic Snellen's drum, and we all have in our boxes red and green filters. So it's something that you can use every time, at least for distance. Now, what this does is the same principle. You're giving one eye red glasses, the other eye a green filter, and you are having a 4-dot target. Now, what is your target? Your target is, imagine, either this flashlight, which has 2 green dots, 1 red light, and 1 yellow light. Okay, so these are 4 dots. Now, these 4 dots, when viewed with both the eyes, can have a few outcomes. So, a person who has a binocular single vision with the right eye viewing this target, there is 2 red dots. So this white dot is also perceived red, and this red dot is also perceived as red. Hence, you have 2 red dots which are forming on your right eye fovea. Now you have the left eye which is viewing through a green filter, and the 2 green dots along with that 1 white dot is viewed as 3 green dots. So your left fovea is seeing 3 green dots. So when these 2 eyes work together, you're going to see a mix of the 2. So when you see the mix, you're going to see this diamond wherein the dot on the top, which is seen red by the right eye and green by the left eye, is going to be viewed as a dark red colored dot. Okay. And the others are going to be viewed as 2 green and 1 red. So this typically shows you that you're saying not seeing with your left eye, only with this eye you're seeing 2 red and you're seeing 3 green. Now, can anyone tell me, it's going to be a quick question, that these are the possible interpretations that the patient can have. Okay, so now this person is wearing glasses with a red filter over the right eye, green filter over the left eye, and this is your 4-dot target. This is, so B is equal to binocular single vision. Can someone tell me what C means? You can unmute yourself and just tell me what C means.
You all can put your answer. Yeah. So Dr. Sandhya has answered that it is the left eye suppression.
Perfect. It is a left eye suppression, meaning that the left eye is not able to see those 3 green dots. So it is only the right eye seeing, which is the 2 red dots. Now, what does D imply?
Anyone can raise your hands, or you can type in the chat box, whatever you're comfortable
Correct. It
with.
is your right eye suppression. That means you're not seeing with the right eye and you're only seeing the 3 dots with your left eye. Now, what does E1 imply? So in E1, yes, it's diplopia. That means the patient is seeing 5 dots, that is the 3 green dots and 2 red dots. 2 eyes are seeing 2 separate sets of images, which is diplopia. Now, what does E2 imply? Diplopia again. So what is the difference between E1 and E2? We are seeing that in E1, the green dots, yes, cross diplopia and uncrossed diplopia. So we are seeing that the right eye is having an uncrossed diplopia, which is seen in a crossed squint. Crossed squint meaning esotropia. So this is in esotropia, E2 is in exotropia because of uncrossed diplopia in a crossed squint. And this F1 and F2, can anyone guess? This is like brownie points. If anyone can guess. F1, which is at 6 meters, is showing 2 red dots. And F2 at 33 centimeters is showing 4 dots.
Can anyone, you can try, this is not an exam, this is, you can take it as a, somebody saying suppression of the right eye.
It is suppression of the right eye, but this is like, okay, I'm going to ask you that there is a patient who has suppression, okay, for near, but for distance it is fusing. What could it be?
Somebody is writing
No, not
amblyopia.
that. It's monofixation syndrome or with microtropia. Okay, great. Now, once you always want to start with your sensory examination first, followed by your motor examination. Why do you want to do that? Because sensory examinations tells us the status of your two eyes when they're trying to fuse. Okay, so you start with stereopsis or the most or the least dissociating tests, and then you start using these red-green filters, which are more dissociating. That means dissociating meaning you're dissociating the right eye vision from the left eye vision. And then you do the motor test, wherein you're actually occluding eyes to do the motor examination, which is the most dissociating. So your sensory examination is to be done first, followed by motor examination. So in your motor assessment, can anyone tell me, just based on assessing a patient when they come in, what are the things that you want to look at? What are critical in observing a patient just when they walk into the OPD? We have certain critical findings that we want to look at. You want to look at head posture of a patient, whether the patient is walking in with a specific head posture. Yes, someone has mentioned head tilt. That's absolutely correct. What else do you want to look at? Face turn, face, chin lift. So these are all types of abnormal head postures which you want to look for when the patient walks in or when the patient is taking a vision test. Also, what you want to check is when you ask a patient to keep reading, does the head posture change as the visual acuity is testing the smallest letters, which can tell you that it is a nystagmus wherein the patient is trying to adopt a head posture for the best acuity. Next, what else do you want to look for? In something called asymmetry of the face is also important. Asymmetry of face is important for fourth nerve palsy, congenital fourth nerve palsies, which have asymmetric facial features. Then we start with the corneal reflex test. So first we're going to do the corneal reflex test, then we do the cover tests, and then we do the assessment of the extraocular movements. So corneal reflex test, as the name suggests, there are two types. One is Hirschberg's corneal reflex test, which is to assess grossly how much is the squint. Then we come to measuring the amount of squint using Krimsky's and modified Krimsky's method, which is also utilizing the principle of a corneal reflex test. So what is a corneal reflex test? As the name suggests, that you're looking at the reflex of what? Reflex of this pen torch light falling on the cornea. This is essentially looking at Purkinje's images. And what we see is there is one reflection which is at the center. This is usually done at near at about 14 inches. And the right eye is showing this white reflex at the center. However, the left eye is showing this reflex towards the limbus. So contrary to what you may think, it is actually the reverse. So if the eye is deviated inside, you see the reflex outside. If the eye is deviated outside, you see the reflex inside. Hence, in an esotropia, you will see the corneal reflex away from the pupil. In an exotropia, so in the esotropia, it is towards the temporal aspect. In exotropia, where the eye is deviated outside, you're going to see it towards the nasal aspect. So in hypertropia, you will see the reflex below. And in hypertropia, the reverse. Okay. Now, there is this very, very old examination which had determined how much is the gross estimate of this corneal reflex to tell us in prism diopter what is the amount of squint. So I'm not sure if you all can go look at this image very clearly, but I'm just going to keep pointing also. So this is the right eye, which is fixing in all. And this is different grades or amounts of esotropia that we are seeing, or that the eye is deviated inwards in the left eye. So this is normal, where both eyes are showing central corneal reflex test. So it is denoted as Hirschberg's central, or Hirschberg's, where this left eye is deviated nasally and you're seeing that the corneal reflex is falling at the pupillary margin. It is 15 degrees of a left esotropia. Or if it is at the limbus, it is 30 degrees of, it's between the pupillary margin and the limbus, it is 30 degrees of a left esotropia. And if it is at the limbus, it is 45 degrees of left esotropia. So you're going to denote it as Hirschberg's test. Either it can be central or 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 45 degrees. Of course, it was not only going to be based on 15 degrees, 30 degrees, or 45 degrees. But in essence, per mm is 2 degrees. Okay, and that's how we have this amount that we can decide. So you can have something which is 20 degrees also guesstimate. Okay, and what is the importance is that if you're seeing 15 degrees on Hirschberg's test, you can expect that the prism bar, or the more accurate testing, is going to give you double the amount. So in degrees, if it is 15 degrees of left esotropia, when you do the prism bar cover test, you can expect it to be 30 prism diopters of left esotropia. Now, this is a Krimsky and modified Krimsky's test. So what does this test do is basically it is to assess the amount of squint using prisms. The utility of this test is for a patient who cannot see well. Okay, so the visual acuity is poor and you have to assess the amount of squint. So you're going to ask them to look at the torchlight and you start using a prism to neutralize the reflex. So you want this reflex, which is in the deviated eye, in the left eye it is deviated at the limbus. By putting the prism over the fixing eye, you are trying to make the reflex centered in the deviated eye, which gives us the amount of squint in prism diopters for an eye which is not seeing well. So if you see this image in A, there is a left esotropia, maybe more than 45 degrees. Assume that this is a prism that they have put close to 30 prism diopters, or this is 30. So say about 45 or 50 prism diopters. This is how much gets neutralized. And now you've put say 90 prism diopters and you'll have it aligned. So you're going to see the two corneal reflexes which are in central alignment, which is going to tell you the amount of squint by Krimsky's test or modified Krimsky's test. Again, the principle that we are using is the corneal reflex only to assess the amount of squint. Then we come to the most important test for us, which is cover-uncover test. So, why do we do a cover test? Cover test is to know whether there is a true squint or a pseudo squint. Then we want to know the type of the squint. We want to know whether it is a tropia or a phoria. What is a tropia? Tropia means a manifest squint. That means the squint which is showing to you. And a phoria, which is a latent squint or a hidden squint. Then you have to decide between a comitant or incomitant. Comitant means it is the same in all directions or all gazes, and incomitant means it is differing in different gazes. Unilateral versus alternating, constant versus intermittent, and whether they have nystagmus. So everything that you wanted to know about the squint, largely you can come to know if you just know how to do a simple cover test. However, in order to do a cover test, there are certain prerequisites. What are your prerequisites? That the patient should have good fixation. Good fixation meaning they should be able to fix centrally with both the eyes. They should have good visual acuity in both the eyes, because if they don't have a good visual acuity, you'll have to go back to doing maybe the Krimsky's test more than doing the cover test. Thirdly, the motility should be good. That means eyes should be able to move in all directions. Otherwise, you will not have a proper cover test. What are the tools that you need? So not a torchlight, you want an occluder and an accommodative target for fixation. Accommodative target is the most important. What are the different types of accommodative targets? So anything in OPD you can pick up. You can have a, so we have something called a Lang's fixation cube that we use, which has a stick with different pictures, or it has a scale with letters or numbers written on it. Or you can use a reading chart, you can use a drop bottle, you can use your prescription, but make sure you use some target wherein the patient has to read or accommodate in order to do your cover test. So what do you do in the cover test? You have to cover, as the name suggests, cover. What do you cover? The apparently fixing eye has to be covered, and you look for the movement in the opposite eye. And what is this going to tell you? If you cover the apparently fixing eye and you see the movement in the opposite eye, you are going to be able to detect a tropia or a manifest squint. Manifest means it's there. How do you detect it? If you see that the eye moved from out to in, the non-fixing eye is moving from out to in, it is an exotropia. In to out is an esotropia. Up to down is a hypertropia, or down to up is a hypertropia. Now, this is where a lot of students do get confused, okay? The direction of the movement is opposite to the direction of the squint. An eye which is outside, a manifest exotropia, that means the eye is deviated outside, will move in when you cover the fixing eye. And when they see the movement of coming in, they think in meaning inward squint, meaning esotropia. But it is that the outward deviated eye is taking up fixation or aligning in the center. Hence, it is moving from out to in. So again, remember, this is where a lot of students get commonly confused. And beware. See, the direction of the movement is coming from where? Wherever it starts from is what the position of the squint is. And where it is coming opposite to that, where it's aligning, is the final position in order to align. So remember, it is exactly opposite direction of what it's coming. So if I were to take you through this, okay, you're seeing that the patient is fixing with the right eye. Okay. Can someone tell me what does this squint look based on the Hirschberg's corneal reflex test?
Left eye ESO as per Dr. Sandhya.
Okay. So Dr. Sandhya and Dr. Tamali, both of y'all are saying that this is a left eye esotropia. But we also said that on Hirschberg's corneal reflex test, we should be able to estimate the amount. Urvi, this is not an exotropia. It's exactly what I was telling you, that you're seeing that the reflex is outside because the eye is inside. So it is a left eye esotropia is the correct answer. Eye is deviated inwards. Yes, this looks like 30 degrees, not 45 degrees. 45 degrees should be somewhere here towards the limbus. 15 will be towards the pupil, and this is somewhere in the middle. So I agree with the answer that on Hirschberg's corneal reflex test, this looks like a 30 degrees of left esotropia. Now, which eye would you want to cover for starting a cover test? Okay. So your apparently fixing eye is your right eye. So you will start with covering of the right eye. What do you see when you cover the right eye? What happens to the opposite eye is what you're going to look at. When I'm covering the right eye, I covered the apparently fixing right eye, and I see that the left eye is going from inside outwards. Left eye will move out, correct. So since the left eye is moving out, what does this mean? On cover test, left eye is moving out. What does it mean? Does it mean that the left eye is fixating now? It means that the left eye is fixating right now, yes. And when I remove the cover from the right eye again, what is happening? The right eye fixes. Correct. So in this case, when I am covering the apparently fixing right eye, the left eye moves from in to out. That means the left eye takes up fixation. And when I remove the cover, the right eye takes fixation again when both the eyes are given a chance to view together. So this would mean this is a manifest squint or a tropia of the left eye, that you are seeing a movement in the opposite eye. Second, so first you are seeing that there is a true squint. What is the type of squint? It is an esotropia, moving from in to out. Third, is it an intermittent squint or a constant squint? It is all the time. So this is a constant squint, always going back. So this is a constant squint. Third, is it only in the left eye or is it alternating between right eye and left eye? What does this mean? Saying this is an alternating squint. Does anyone have, I want to know whether most people agree that this is an alternating squint or is this only a left eye esotropia? I'll show it to you again. Dr. Tamali says, can't say. And there are two people who are saying that this is only a left eye esotropia. So I agree with those. Yeah, she's saying can't decide till I cover the other eye. Correct. But based on this, every time I occlude the right eye and the right eye only takes up fixation after uncovering, implies that the right eye is definitely dominant if it may still be alternating. Okay. So this most likely has to be a left eye esotropia, because when given a chance for the two eyes to view together, it's always the right eye that takes up the fixation and never the left eye. So this is a left eye esotropia, non-alternating. Okay. Now, cover and uncover test. So first thing was cover test. Now we're doing cover uncover test. So cover uncover test is basically in order to pick up the, to basically pick up phoria. And what do you want to do in this is, you, once the non-fixing eye, what was a non-fixing eye in the previous case? Our left eye has taken up fixation, and you remove the cover from the fixing eye. That means you remove the cover from the right eye. You want to see the response of the eye under the cover. So what can be the interpretation of this? Now, if the right eye did not hold fixation. That means your left eye held fixation. It would be an alternating squint. Okay, Dr. Tamali. However, if the left eye loses fixation and the eye undercover refixates, that means the right eye refixates, it is a unilateral squint. That means it is a left squint only. If the fixing eye fixes briefly until a blink and then moves back to fixing with the right eye, it means it is an alternating squint with dominance of the right eye. So what that means is, say I covered the right eye and the left eye took up fixation, but very, very briefly, just for a second. And the minute the patient blinked, again the right eye took up fixation, then it is alternating because at least for some time, the other eye took up fixation. So when you see that both eyes can fixate, when both eyes are viewing together, either right eye fixates or left eye fixates under binocular viewing conditions without any occluder being on one of the eyes, that means it is alternate. But if there is a preference, as soon as they blink, if there is tendency of only one eye to keep fixing, that means there is dominance. Okay. So this last case was suggestive of a left esotropia. Now we are going to take the next example. Now I want to know that we are going to be able to pick up phoria by using cover-uncover test. So in this case, where you're seeing that both eyes are looking, Hirschberg is what in this case? Can someone tell me what is the Hirschberg's test? Yes, Hirschberg's test for this patient looks central. Now, I occlude the, no, it's not ortho. Hirschberg's is central. Ortho is going to be something that we are going to use for a cover test or cover test. Cover test, uncover test will tell you orthotropia or exotropia, esotropia, or exophoria or esophoria, hypo, etc. Now, cover test tells you orthotropias. Hirschberg tells you central or ETXT, etc. Now on covering the right eye for a centrally fixing eye, under this translucent occluder, you are seeing what's happening to the right eye. Someone, what's happening to the right eye? Right eye is moving out. Dr. Sandhya has written right eye exo. So I do not want you all to mention exo, eso, etc. I want you all to mention whether it is exotropia, exophoria, esotropia, esophoria. No writing that it is a exo or eso in exam also. You all have to mention that it's a tropiophoria. So it's written that, yes, it is a right eye exophoria because it's only under cover or under occlusion or breaking of fusion that the eye is drifting outwards temporally, which means that it is a latent squint. Latent squint is aphoria. A latent squint where the eye is going outwards or temporarily is an exophoria. If the same patient had the eye going inwards, it would be an esophoria. However, what I want you all to remember is to know whether it was a phoria or tropia. So we finished cover uncover. So this told you it was a phoria. Now we are going to go to the next examination, which is your alternate cover test. So what the alternate cover test does, it tells you the total amount of squint, that is tropia, that is your manifest squint, plus phoria or your latent squint is what you're going to elicit on your alternate cover test. And if you have an intermittent squint, you will start precipitating it because you're going to continuously break the fusion. And what you want to do in this test is you want to alternately cover each eye without allowing them to fuse in the middle. That means you want to occlude and quickly shift the occluder to the other eye, quickly shift to the other eye, wherein never the two eyes are allowed to look together. Okay? So you're breaking the fusion as much as possible. Now, this is an example of someone Hirschberg's corneal reflex test. Quickly answer. Okay, I'm going to give it out. This is on Hirschberg's a left, say about 20 degrees of a left exotropia. Now, because the right eye is the apparently fixing eye, I occlude the right eye. And what happens is that the left eye takes up fixation. But now I'm going to quickly shift the occluder to the other eye without allowing the right eye to. So without allowing the left eye to fix, I just quickly shifted the occluder to this eye. And now you see that the right eye is fixing and the left eye is going from out to in. What does this mean? Can anyone tell me what does this mean? What does this patient have?
You can type or you can ask to unmute if anyone wants to answer. No one, I suppose.
Okay, so unless you had a cover test before this, which told you that one eye was fixing, we will not be able to differentiate whether this is an alternating exotropia or only an exophoria. Okay, that's what I want you to remember. But if there was a manifest squint, this would be an alternating exotropia. Now, what does this mean? What this shows is that I've removed the cover and you're seeing a manifest squint. The minute you're seeing a manifest squint, it means this is a case of an alternating exotropia. So you have decided the type of the squint and now you want to measure the amount of the squint. So how do you measure the amount of squint? First, your basic test was giving you your corneal reflex test, a gross estimate. How do you accurately assess the amount is using prisms. Now, what do prisms do? Prisms use to neutralize the amount of squint and tells you exact amount of squint. So you measure the amount of deviation in all the gazes. Squint examination is always to be done with glasses and without glasses, and it is to be done in all directions of gaze. When you use a prism, you want to use the prism with apex towards the deviation. So esotropia, wherein the eye is deviated inside, you're going to use the prism with the apex inside, but it is always denoted as in terms of the base. So if it is an exotropia, that the eye is deviated outside and you're going to put a prism with the apex outside over my left eye, you're going to denote it by the base. So the base is inside, so you're going to call it base in. And you denoted it in prism diopters, and you will alternately cover and you will assess the amount of squint with increasing amount of squints wherein it is neutralized or you see no movement of the eye. Okay. So this is the physics of refraction in a prism where it is deviated towards the base. Okay. And you can see in this image that when you have a prism which deviates it towards the base, this is a squinting eye where the image is not falling on the fovea. And here, when you put in a prism of the exact amount, it will fall on the fovea, and because it falls on the fovea, you see no new movement, okay, which is how prisms work. And hence, if you use a power of lower thing, you will see that there is some amount of drift from the central position. And if you use the final amount, you will see the neutralizing point. This is showing us, say, a patient who has 25 prism diopters of exotropia, and you use the prism with base in direction, and then you went on increasing it. So we look down. This is a 5 prism diopters and I cover. I'm seeing movement. Then I went to 15 prism diopters and now I again cover. I'm still seeing movement. So then I go to 25 prism diopters and then I see no movement. That means this is a 25 prism diopters base in of exotropia, left exotropia. The last test in the cover test and all is the simultaneous prism bar cover test or SPCT. Simultaneous meaning you simultaneously use an occluder and simultaneously use a prism, and this assesses only the tropia or the manifest squint component. So your prism bar alternate cover test give you the final amount of tropia plus phoria. However, this will give you only the tropia. So this, if you're going to use both together, you're going to see that there will be no movement, say at 25 prism diopters will be your 25 SPCT. Normally it is used only for smaller amount of squints up to 10 prism diopters. Now, final assessment is that of extraocular movements. So what all you want to know in movements? We discuss what are ductions, that are monocular eye movements, versions, which are binocular conjugate eye movements, vergence, which is binocular disconjugate eye movements, and then the excursion of muscles. That means, are the muscles acting normally? Is there an overaction or underaction? So, okay, sorry, we'll start with this. This is where you start assessing the eye movements, okay? And when you look for eye movements, medial rectus. So first you have to understand what are the actions of the eye muscles. Simple way to remember is something called SINRAD. SIN means superiors intaut. SIN, superiors intaut, and RAD meaning recti, R for recti, AD for adduct. Superiors intaut and recti adduct, and you can remember this diagram which tells you, actually if you look at these vectors, you'll come to know very nicely. So this is the diagram of the right eye where you're drawing direction. So medial rectus, lateral rectus, and superior rectus is going up and it intorts. So it elevates and it intorts. Inferior oblique elevates and it extorts. Inferior rectus depresses and it extorts, and superior oblique depresses and it intorts. Okay, this will tell you easily, you can remember eye movement and eye muscle actions. Where you assess for the muscle action is in these positions. So if you're looking at the right eye and you want to look for the action of inferior oblique muscle, you're going to ask the patient to look in this direction to look for inferior oblique, this direction to look for superior rectus, inferotemporally for inferior rectus, and superinasally for superior oblique. Okay. Now we are going to look for amount. So what is normal? Then we can tell you what is abnormal. So everything which is overacting is denoted in plus. Everything is underacting is denoted in minus. So this, say, is, for example, we are looking at the left eye lateral rectus function. Okay. So normally it comes all the way to the temporal aspect or the lateral canthus. Okay. And then if you look at what is at midway, it is -4. Between midway, so when you have 2/3, it is -2, 1/3 is -1. This is how much movement is restricted or limited, will give you -1, -2, -3, -4 for lateral rectus. Now, similarly for inferior oblique, say if you're looking at overaction. So overaction for inferior oblique is going to be how much the muscle in that direction elevates the eye. Elevates the eye meaning, again, we are looking here at the left eye inferior oblique position. This is the position where you look for inferior oblique in this gaze. This is just elevating a little, it's +1. If it goes more up, it's +2. Almost at 90 degrees is going to be +4. Okay. If you just had to draw angles here, it is not a very absolute test. It is a very subjective test. However, this is the only way we currently test it. Okay. Now, when we said the ductions are monocular eye movements, what is it defined as? So if you look up with one eye, it's called supraduction or circumduction. Down is infraduction or dorsumduction. Adduction or adduction is when you look inwards. Abduction is when you look outwards, or abduction. Encycloduction is intorsion, meaning the eye moves in, and extorsion is that the eye moves out. Now, versions are binocular eye movements, but they're disconjugate. So versions are conjugate and versions are disconjugate, meaning they do not follow Hering's law. Hering's law of equal innervation, meaning they are moving the eye in the same direction. Now, vergence means that the eyes move in opposite direction. So convergence is when both the medial recti work together to converge or come inside, which violates the Hering's law. And divergence, so that both the lateral recti act to move outwards or diverge. Okay, I'll have to quickly finish because we're already at 8, but we will take it quickly. Okay. Versions are binocular movements which are conjugate, so they follow Hering's law, and these are the movements you tested in. So when both the eyes look up, it's called supraversion, infraversion. Right side is dextroversion, left is levoversion. Okay. And both the eyes or the yoke muscles work together. We cannot complete a squint examination till we go through a fundus examination to assess what is sitting behind on the retina. Is there any sensory status which is given rise to that eye not seeing and drifting outwards or inwards and leading to the squint? Also, the torsion you want to assess on your indirect ophthalmoscopy, which is, this is your disc, this is your fovea, and normally up to this 1/3 disc diameter. This is the inverted image that we actually see on indirect ophthalmoscopy. So while you're seeing the fundus on an ophthalmoscope, if you see that this foveal reflex is falling above this superior edge of the disc edge, it is +1, +2, +3, +4 extorsion. Okay. And if it is falling downwards, it is intorsion. So when you actually take a fundus photo, it's going to be reversed. Okay, exactly the opposite. That brings us to the end of our squint examination. I'm just going to quickly ask you all this one question. This is a patient with this kind of a Hirschberg's corneal reflex test, and we occluded the right eye and the left eye stayed in the same position. It never moved. What is this?
Anyone? You can try. Dr. Juhi.
We said that we can first, everything that we did, cover test, etc., everything was first to begin with whether it is a true squint or a pseudo squint. Only if it was a true squint did everything else. Okay, Dr. Sandhya says it is a third nerve palsy. Okay, it can be a third nerve palsy. What would you see if it is in a third nerve palsy? I am telling you that the extraocular movements of this girl are full. There is no limitation of movements in any eye. So the left eye has complete eye movements. Then what does this patient have? Left eye, very less vision. Okay, that's possible. If the left eye is not seeing, the patient will not fixate with the left eye at all, and hence you will see no movement. Okay, and which is your prerequisite for a covered test. Excellent. So one option is that this patient has very less vision. Now I'm telling you that this patient has 6/9 vision in the left eye. What does this patient have now? What was a pseudo squint? Okay, I'll quickly take you through that. So pseudo squint is that it appears like a squint, but it is not a true squint. What that means is that the eye or the visual axis has a certain angle or a direction, which is called angle kappa. Okay, so a positive angle kappa lets you feel that the eye appears exotropic, which would be in this case that this patient has a positive angle kappa. Hence, even if the patient has good vision, when you actually cover the apparently fixing eye, there is no movement in the opposite eye, meaning there was no true squint. It was a pseudo squint. And hence, this is a case of no squint, only a positive angle kappa, or that the eye appears to be squinting. Okay. And what you see very commonly in children is a broad nasal bridge with the eyes looking like they are in esotropia. So they look like they're pseudo esotropic. However, it's not a true squint. And when you occlude the eye, you will see that there is no movement of the opposite eye. And that is not a true squint actually. So primarily, let's begin at identifying what is a true squint or a pseudo squint, and then we can take it further at what type of a squint and how much is the squint. That brings us to an end of the class today. If you all have any questions, you all can let me know.
So that was very nice lecture, Pooja, and I think most of the doubts are clear because you tried making it very interactive. There is only one question that I got it, that there is why non-fixating eye fixates when we cover a normal eye with the prism in the Krimsky test.
What would come again?
Let me just put it on the board for everyone's benefit. It's a why non-fixating eye fixates when we cover a normal eye with the prism.
Yes, that is because it follows the Hering's law of fixation. Okay, so I'm going to take you back to that image, okay, where we have the diagram of prisms. Okay, if you'll see this prism, what is happening over here? The minute you put a prism over one eye, it has to start moving the eye in one direction. And when it starts doing that, because you have Hering's law, the other eye has to move. There is no option. We had an image for Krimsky's here. This is actually not showing you the this thing, but it is because it's mentioned here also. It's based on the Hering's law of equal innovation. So it's because of Hering's law that one eye takes up fixation, so the other eye also has to move. That's why it gets centralized. Is that clear?
I hope, yeah. Then there is one more question. Can you explain what is ARC, abnormal retinal correspondence?
Perfect. Yes. So when we have discussed all of this, we have not discussed one important aspect called retinal correspondence. So what is, to discuss what is abnormal retinal correspondence, you have to look at what is normal retinal correspondence. So our retina has points. So the two fovea in both the eyes are corresponding retinal points. What it means is that in the brain, the images formed on one fovea and the other fovea can fuse. Okay. And likewise, you have corresponding points on either retina, which will fuse to form a certain image. Hence, when you have an eye which is squinting, so say you have a left eye exotropia and you do not have the image falling on the fovea. It is forming, the image on the left eye is falling on a non-foveal point. That means it is falling on a non-corresponding retinal point. Now, sometimes one form of the sensory adaptation to this kind of an anomaly is that this abnormal corresponding point becomes a corresponding point, and that is called abnormal retinal correspondence. So what it means is, if that patient is fixing with an abnormal retinal corresponding point, and you do a cover test, are you going to see the movement on that eye or are you not? Because that patient is actually fixing with an abnormal retinal corresponding eye. Who was the one who asked the question? I want to know if they understood.
Dr. ARJ. No movement.
Yes, you see no movement because it is fixing with an abnormal retinal correspondence. So this is one of the other possibilities with a cover test, which is not moving. So one was pseudo squint, the other is an abnormal retinal correspondence, apart from the low vision, etc. Then, which is
Then
an
there are two more questions. Can you explain simultaneous prism bar again? One, and can you explain microtropia?
okay. So simultaneous prism bar cover test is basically to pick up here. Wait. Yes. What we are doing in simultaneous prism bar cover test is, say we are wanting to assess only the tropia component. Okay. When you alternately cover eyes with prism and you're neutralizing it. So I've put a prism and say I have 45 degrees, 45 prism diopters of exotropia, which is neutralized using alternate cover test on prism bar. Okay, this is 45 PD on prism bar cover test, which was equal to the tropia plus phoria, or the total squint, manifest plus latent. Now I only want to know how much is only the manifest squint but not the latent squint. So what I do is I fix, now my left eye is exotropic, imagine. I use a cover to occlude my right eye, which is my fixing eye. And I use a prism with the base in front of the left eye, right? For exotropia. And I simultaneously nullify or neutralize the amount of squint. Say I put 10 prism diopters and I saw that the eye was still moving from out to in. That means it is still not neutralized. Then I put 20 prism diopters and it still moved from out to in, still not neutralized. Now I put 25 prism diopters and I see that the eye has stopped moving. It is in the center. This means that the tropia is neutralized at 25 prism diopters. So out of the 45 prism diopters, 25 prism diopters is the tropic component and the remaining 20 prism diopters is your phoric component or your latent squint. So that tells you only your manifest amount of squint. Is that clear?
Dr. Pooja, I think the questions are never ending. And now they want to know about Maddox rod, wink, and other questions. So
that we can take in another class.
I think we can take a same like basics too. So whichever things are not covered, we in the next month when we continue the schedule, then you can take a second class on the basics of the squint, and then cover the rest of the things which we have not covered in this lecture. I think that will be.
And all is like a topic in itself.
Yeah,
it is an LFU for you, just the way the basic squint examination would be like an entire topic on its own. So we can definitely discuss it, but later. I think it's beyond understanding of it today.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Pooja, thank you everyone for attending. All the lectures will be available on the YouTube. The link will be shared with you in a short while on the group itself. Thank you everyone for attending.
Bye, good night. If there are any questions, actually they can ask me personally later. They don't understand if they read it later.
You can either put it on group or on the YouTube comments, and we will make sure that we get back to you with the answers.
Perfect. Okay. All right.
Thank
yeah. Bye. Good night.